Looking forward to the official launch of the iPhone 12, which will be next month. But there's something we already know about, which is actually super strange, but hey, it's 2020, anything can happen. And that is Apple's brand new flagship SoC, the A14 chipset, which is strange because usually this comes along with the iPhone flagship launch. Not this year though, we've already got this SoC launched with the iPad Air. Now that we know about the A14 and we know really more or less what Apple have done with it, I want to compare the A14 chipset in terms of the power and efficiency compared to the A13, but also the upcoming flagships from the Android lot, the Snapdragon 875, the Exynos 1000, because Apple are kind of taking a risk here. They're actually seemingly going more towards efficiency than power, but in the Android world, some really powerful chipsets are coming out. So what exactly is going on? So the iPhone 12 this year, well, all four of them, the new 5.4 inch, two 6.1 inch models, a Pro and a non-Pro, and then the 6.7 inch Pro Max, all going to be using this A14 chipset and all going to be having 5G as well, which is important because I think this influenced Apple's decision. So according to Apple, anyway, the A14 has 11.8 billion transistors. What does that actually mean? Not much really, but it's a few billion more than we got on the A13. It's actually the world's first 5nm chipset, and yeah, fair play to Apple, they've done it. It's a great move. The 5nm chipsets from Qualcomm and Samsung will be coming out early next year. During the launch of the A14, Apple didn't share any specifics about the chipset in terms of clock speeds or the power, and yeah, that's exactly what Apple usually do. However, they did compare the A14 to the A12. The reason they compared it to the A12 and not the A13 is because they were launching this chipset in the iPad Air. The previous generation of the iPad Air uses the A12, so it makes sense to compare the two. But obviously we want to know what the A14 is bringing in improvements over the A13. Anyway, Apple say they are using new, larger performance cores, small power efficient cores in a 2+4 configuration, so 2 power cores, 4 efficient cores. That's in the CPU, by the way, and they say that the A14 is about 40% faster than the A12. Given that we know that the A13 is 20% faster than the A12, can therefore work out that the A14 is 16% better than the A13. Quite a good improvement in the CPU. If we do all the same calculations for the GPU, we can work out that the GPU in the A14 is more or less 8% faster than the GPU in the A13, so not a massive boost. So these numbers are pretty good, and we know that Apple makes pretty much the most powerful chipset in smartphones, thanks mainly to their custom cores, the big custom cores that they use that are super powerful, really expensive to produce, but Apple sell more high-end handsets than anyone else, and so economies of scale dictate that really they can do this and still make the money that they need to do. Whereas in the Android world, Qualcomm, Snapdragon have to take cost into account a little bit more because their SoCs are used over a wide variety of products. But what's interesting this year is that in the Android world, there are some new custom CPU cores that are going to be really powerful. And actually, if we look at the improvements that Apple have made, it looks like they didn't go for all out power and the most powerful chipset they could have made, but actually took a little bit off and maybe have gone for some more power efficiency in the chipset rather than just all out power. So then comes this Antutu benchmark score that apparently gives us an initial benchmark for the A14 chipset in the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So yeah, apparently they compared the iPhone 11 Pro Max to the iPhone 12 Pro Max, even though the iPhone 12 hasn't been released yet. Not quite sure how they got a working model anyway right now, but hey, here's the test. It shows a more or less 16% improvement in the CPU score. This is on Antutu benchmark though, so definitely going to be different from Apple's figures. And the GPU score difference is, to be honest, pretty much nothing. So really the same score. We also get this complete benchmark score from Antutu for the iPhone 12 Pro Max, 572,333, which if you just go and compare that to a bunch of Android phones that are out now or other Apple products, doesn't really look that good. Why doesn't it look that good? Well, to be honest, the iPhone 12 isn't out yet, and so, well, the software, we have no idea what it is. Is it pre-release software? What were the test conditions like? We really don't know. So we have to take all of these Antutu scores definitely with a pinch of salt. Anyway, from the Antutu scores and the small amount that Apple have told us already, it looks like Apple have leaned towards slightly better battery life over top end power. And it's a risk, but I think maybe the right decision overall from Apple. We know that all phones in the lineup this year are getting 5G, which is a bigger power draw. We've also seen that the actual batteries going into the iPhone 12 series are definitely not bigger, actually a little bit smaller than we got in the iPhone 11 series, which is really, really strange when you think of it. They're adding 5G and not adding anything to the battery whatsoever. So something has to give, and it looks like Apple have just really focused on getting some efficiency out of their new chipset rather than just making it draw loads of power and then basically having way worse battery life. Of course, the solution to all of this is Apple making a slightly thicker phone with a bigger battery, but hey, it's Apple. They are not going to do that, so this is what we've got. Also, with this Antutu benchmark, you can actually see that the user experience score is way lower than the iPhone 11 Pro, and this basically suggests that the software on the iPhone 12 Pro that they tested just isn't ready yet, and so this benchmark, I think it's kind of misleading. So from the very early specs that we know about the A14 going into the iPhone 12, looks like Apple have taken user experience into account, not just giving way more power that I guess most of us really don't even notice anyway. It's powerful enough for sure, still leading the market, but giving better battery life, which is way more noticeable. If you get a couple of hours extra each day, that is going to affect your user experience way more than having power that maybe just isn't used anyway. The risk that Apple are taking here, though, is letting the Android SoCs, so the Snapdragon 875 and the Exynos 1000, catch up and actually be just as powerful. So ARM recently announced their new X1 CPU cores, which are going to be big, expensive, and powerful. And thanks to Ice Universe, we now know that both Qualcomm and also Samsung with their Exynos chipsets are going to be using these custom cores, and actually their SoCs are going to pretty much be the same in terms of the makeup of the cores. The reason ARM made these custom cores, these X1 cores, is because both Qualcomm and Samsung asked them to make it so that they could get way more power from these chipsets and actually close the gap to Apple. So whilst those Antutu scores are definitely a little bit misleading for me because the iPhone 12 isn't released yet and it's obviously on pre-release software, so those scores are going to grow. It looks like Apple have actually just taken a little bit off peak power, gone for slightly better battery life, whereas in the Android world, those new chipsets are going to be super expensive and powerful, maybe closing the gap between the A14 and the Android flagship SoCs. A really interesting difference, and I guess we'll wait and see if Apple are still just going to keep their lead in terms of peak power, whilst also giving some good battery life. And let's see how close the Exynos 1000 and the Snapdragon 875 can get in terms of peak power next year, because in the Android world, you just put a bigger battery in, and I'm interested to see when all the phones are released what it's going to be, because those Antutu scores, I think, a little bit misleading for now. I'd love to know your thoughts on this though. Do you think it's a good decision from Apple overall, just to focus on user experience rather than all-out power? How's it going to affect the iPhone 12? Let me know in the comments as always. That's it for this one though. I hope you enjoyed it. Bit different from me this one, but if you did, thumbs up on the video, and I'll see you in the next one.